We'll move on, Keith, and talk about Manchester United. Now, what are your thoughts, Keith, currently around Erik ten Hag? Can you see him staying beyond the end of this season, or actually do you think he is on borrowed time as manager?
I think he's on borrowed time. I think, there's no way. I just think he's been overwhelmed. Hasn't had the right support in some areas. I think the club's been in turmoil behind the scenes in many areas as well. So he's had a tough bit to handle. I know David Moyes had the same issues when he first took over. The biggest problem, I think, there was that David Gill, the chief executive, left at the same time as Fergie. And that would have been a big issue because, Ed Woodward was stepping in as CEO, who really hadn't got any major football experience, as I understand it, couldn't get the right players that David wanted. And so I believe that, that was a big problem for David. I think we're seeing the same sort of thing in the Ten Hag reign, where you've seen Richard Arnold come in as chief executive after Woodward. Now Richard Arnold's gone with Jim Radcliffe coming in, etc., etc. A lot of musical chairs going on. So it's been difficult for Ten Hag, but I don't think he's the right fit. I think the new owners will see another way forward for them if they can. It was an incredible analogy at the weekend to see that downpour of rain hit the end of the game after they've been beaten by Arsenal. It's been picked up by all the media, of course, but it did seem a very appropriate analogy. And unfortunately, I think this will be the end of his time.
Talking of that rain, Keith, I'm going to pick you up on that, and I'm intrigued to get your opinion. So Jim Ratcliffe, we know we've discussed in previous weeks the potential about the new stadium. Given that rain and all of the sort of controversy that followed, some of the memes online that were posted, is it likely that he could push for a new stadium because of the issues around, the leaking of the roof and sort of the stadium being slightly outdated?
Really interesting, because I've been looking into this a lot and spending some time about this whole issue. I think that they would. I know they've been looking for a long time at either building a new stadium or whether they redevelop Old Trafford. That's going to be a big issue for them. And I think that from what I understand now, they're plumping on the side of staying and redeveloping Old Trafford in some way. It is something they need to do. The facility itself has not been looked after properly. I don't think the Glazers have done a good job at all in terms of keeping Old Trafford up to speed. There seems to have been a lack of love for the stadium, and that's come through, as we've seen over the last couple of years with roofs leaking and all the rest of it. It's been awful. So I think that they're going to have to decide now, how it's paid for. There's been this rumours of taxpayers' money being brought forward. Andy Burnham's been on board for that. You got Seb Coe now looking at this, chairing the committee that's looking on what they should do next. So there's a lot of talk and a lot of thought that's gone into this. I think they will plump on the side of trying to redevelop Old Trafford. Now, what that leads to is an interesting position. If they don't build a new stadium next to Old Trafford, then they're going to have to find somewhere to play while Old Trafford is redeveloped. I've seen one interesting story I saw this week was that Wembley may be even considered, and Man United might consider playing their games at Wembley, which, when you actually think about it, is not so far-fetched. Now, I can't imagine the Mancunian fans would be over the moon with that, but Spurs fans did move while they were to Wembley. Well, that happened before, so there is precedent. It can be done. And then I was just thinking last night, I thought, well, here's a bombshell. Goodison will be free from the end of next season, when Everton moves to Bramley Moor Dock, and at least it would keep the Manchester games in the northwest of England. Now, I say that with a bit of a cheeky smile because I know the sort of issues and problems that could cause. And I think having Manchester fans in Liverpool every other weekend, I don't think the police would be too happy about that for a start. But nevertheless, it's there's pros and cons. The pros are for Everton. They might get some serious revenue out of Goodison for another 2 years. And it would be very funny to see Everton come and play Manchester United when it was the away game at Manchester United, when Everton had to come back to Goodison. So my cheeky side and mischievous side thought, well, that's an idea, because I don't think there's any other major stadiums in the northwest that might be possible. But we'll have to see where Man United get out on this. I don't know how long Seb Coe's committee's got to report, but they're going to have to get a move on, because this is a pretty urgent situation. They're going to have to make a decision. I don't think any taxpayers' money should be involved other than road improvements around the stadium if they're needed. That's normal. That's what's happened for most stadiums. But certainly with the wealth of the owners, etc., I see no reason for the government to fund a Wembley of the Northwest as they have been trying to promote. It just doesn't make any common sense to me at all. So they're going to have to make a decision. I think they will try, and if they want to keep the spiritual home of Old Trafford, which I think the fans would like to be, then they've got to solve this issue of where they play while that's done. So a lot of interesting decisions to come, and I'll be watching that space very closely.
What would it mean, Keith, looking on pitch for some of their stars like Bruno Fernandes, Marcus Rashford, Jadon Sancho? Are we expecting to see some sales going into the summer, given all the issues we've seen on field and off field for Manchester United? What are your predictions for that going into the summer transfer window?
Well, again, I mean, they haven't got Dan Ashworth in position yet, so he's still on gardening leave. So they haven't got their sporting director there. I'm sure there's talks and things happening in the background that either don't involve him or he's doing things appropriately. I'm sure of that. But you'd think you'd need somebody at the top to be able to steer that sort of, rebuilding process and be in position to do that. And having done a lot of work on it already, that normally it would take, the whole season before to plan this sort of big move. So they've got to decide on a new manager. They've got to get the manager to buy into what they're trying to do. They've then got to negotiate the players. They've got to sell some. It's a lot of work to be done, and I think it could be a 2-season process, is what they're looking at now from where they are at this moment. I think there will be some departures, no doubt, but who will be actually dictating that and managing that process? I think they've got to hurry up, and I think that's why Ratcliffe should have paid the money that was required by Newcastle, got Ashworth in place, and got on with the process. This is what's going to cost them a lot more money in the end, making bad decisions, rather than paying up the compensation for Ashworth. So I'm a little confused as to why they haven't done that.
So is the immediate concern for them, Keith, do you think, to fix the roof, to stop the leaking? Is the issue the stadium? Should they look at getting Dan Ashworth in as soon as possible? What should their next sort of steps and targets be for the short-term future?
Well, at the Man United, they're the biggest club in the world, apparently. So why can't they do all of them? I don't see any reason for they have to prioritise them. I mean, fixing the roof should have been done before. I don't know, obviously there's a big structural problem, but still, I mean, it's got to be done. And that should be a given. In terms of everything else, they should be able to, chew and spit gum at the same time. So I don't see why, anything has to be prioritised or made exclusive. Let's get on with all of it. As I say, they're a big organisation. They've got very wealthy owners. Resources aren't an issue for them. So let's just see clarity of thought and get on with it and get it done.